These are the 5 biggest lies in the audio production industry. This new plugin is a game changer and will take your mix to the next level. Yeah, it probably won't. Of all the things that affect your mix, and of all the things that have to do with the finished sound of it, if you think about how plugins actually work, they do a lot of things on individual tracks and buses and eventually the 2-bus or master bus to achieve a desired result. That's really different than one thing fixing everything. And this is how a lot of plugin manufacturers advertise because they're tantalizing. I mean, plugins look awesome. There's a real big reason why they're so focused on the visual imagery of something, because it makes it look like you're buying something tangible. It makes it look like you're buying hardware. And that makes you feel better about the fact that you're purchasing something that is so incredibly transient and subject to change. No plugin is going to fix bad mix architecture. It's not going to fix things like poor arrangement. Now, there are individual plugins that can help with certain parts of those aspects, sure. But there's no one plugin that's going to fix everything about your mix. They're simply not made that way. Even, fantastic and new and groundbreaking plugins, even plugins that you put on your master bus, are still not going to take a poorly written song and make it good. Or they're not going to make a poorly mixed song and make it good. This high-end audio device is the only way to do serious studio production. One of the next big audio lies, and this is a big one, is that hardware has to be incredibly expensive to do credible work. You have to spend $4,000 or $5,000 on an audio interface, or a set of converters, or thousands of dollars on an analog EQ or, a compressor. And man, that has just never been more untrue than it is now, especially with companies like, Warm Audio and Lindell and Black Lion and Heritage and Klark Teknik. And there's just so many out there that make great clones of classic studio gear, classic studio hardware. And working with hardware, there's a reason why studios use hardware. Studios like us for the same reason, because working with hardware is a very different animal altogether than software. Software has a sameness to it. And eventually you're just always doing stuff on your mouse. You're just clicking through things and clicking and dragging or on a trackpad. That is not in any way, shape, or form similar to working with the hardware counterparts of those pieces of software or plugins. You react differently to them. You treat them differently because they have different character. They have real unique personalities. And as a result, they become musically valuable. You actually change the way you work and you change the decisions you make, especially musical decisions, in mixing and tracking when you're working with hardware because of that unique personality. Back in the day, something like an analog EQ or an analog compressor would just be out of reach financially for all but the most expensive studios. And that's just not the case anymore. It allows you, for the first time ever, to really understand the benefit and the joy and the musicality of working with those pieces of hardware. And not to mention the fact that hardware has 10 times the longevity of software and plugins. They don't go out of date every time the OS gets updated, or the company gets bought out, or they merge with somebody else and they drop the line or whatever. There is absolutely something to be said for working with hardware in a musical environment, especially as you gain experience with it. As you learn to use it more and more, it becomes more and more valuable. Those pieces become your go-to pieces for things like tracking and mixing. And that's really hard to replicate. One of my other favorite audio production lies is the myth that my DAW sounds better than yours. It just sounds more musical. It sounds warmer in some way. Well, the truth of it is that if your DAW sounds different than anybody else's DAW, recording exactly the same material under the exact same circumstances, then your DAW is just plain broken. Long, long gone are the days when DAWs recorded into lower bit depth engines, and that's ancient history now. Especially with things like 32-bit float engines, in some cases 64, the difference between any DAW is just about statistically impossible. And there are a myriad of online null tests to back this up. Now, there are a ton of other ways to make it sound different, plugins and routing options and all kinds of other ways to make your DAW sound different than someone else's. But I promise you, if the DAW itself sounds different than anyone else's DAW recording exactly the same material under the same circumstances, then unfortunately your DAW is just plain broken. And one of the other big audio lies is that my software sounds exactly like your hardware. Man, I wish that were true. I really, really do. But the truth of it is, it just doesn't. Now, there are some amazing tape sims out there and have absolutely their own character and come pretty close to a snapshot of other pieces of analog gear. But are they exactly the same? No, and there's a really important reason why. And that's because analog gear misbehaves in the most amazingly musical way, but it misbehaves. It never does anything the same way twice. It is chaotic at best. All of those things add to the character of what it's like to own vintage analog equipment. You know, obviously not everybody can afford that or have access to it. And so for those, you know, its software emulations are a godsend because you get you in the ballpark, but they're not the same. They're not really even close in a lot of ways. And it's because of that musical unpredictability. When you record to tape, because of not just the signal path and all the amplifiers and circuitry and stuff, but the tape itself, you're actually recording a performance of the tape machine itself, and the way it misbehaves and the way it never does any of that misbehaving twice, that's what makes it so unique and so musically wonderful. It's sort of like saying just because somebody plays really, really similar to Jimi Hendrix, that they're exactly the same as Jimi Hendrix. And the truth is, they're not, and they never will be, because that character and that musicality is what's so incredibly hard to replicate. And the final, and probably by far and away, the biggest audio lie by far, is that there's some secret engineering or mixing technique the pros don't want you to know about. To what end? I mean, really, think about that all the way through. Anything that you bring to a professional, be it a tracking house or a mixing house like ours, or a mastering engineer, or any of those, and has most of the problems ironed out, it makes their life a lot easier because they can do more for you and produce a better result. So for example, in a tracking or mixing, studio, if you bring in a well-arranged song, a well-written song, it makes the job of the tracking and mix engineer a lot easier to record it because you're giving them something that's already in the ballpark to work with. And if you take that mix and you make a great dynamic, musical sounding mix and hand it to a mix engineer, they're gonna have a lot more to work with. And what you're gonna end up in the end is a great sounding, radio ready, professional sounding production. If there's any technique or anything, really, honestly, that has more to do with your stuff sounding radio ready and professional than anything else, it's probably arrangement. Write a better song. Learn how to use the plugins and hardware you already own. Learn how to use the instruments you already play. Get better at those things, and I promise you, professionals will be a lot happier with the product or the result you're bringing them. Believe me, they want you to know about those things. It makes their life much, much easier. It makes my life much easier. When artists bring in well-written material, well-arranged material, I can do so much more with it. When I was a young mix engineer growing up in Los Angeles, I had the incredibly good fortune of working with some amazing mentors in some really amazing studios. And in all that time, what I found was those mentors and those experienced producers and engineers were incredibly generous with their knowledge and their experience. They were stoked to find somebody who was as driven and excited about audio engineering and audio production as they were. That's probably by far the biggest audio lie, is that somebody's keeping something from you, and that's what's keeping you from doing your best work. It's not. What's keeping you from doing your best work is believing stuff like that. So instead, what I would recommend is believe in yourself. You probably have pretty good musical instincts, or you wouldn't have made it this far in the first place. Work on doing the best arrangement that you can do. Work on writing the best songs you can do. Work on learning the material and the plugins and the software you already own in the DAW you already use. I promise you, That'll produce better and more professional results than any one secret anyone is trying to sell you. Hey, thanks for hanging out, guys. I appreciate the company. If this was helpful in any way, please hit the subscription and notification bells. It really does help keep a young channel like this going and growing. Helps me make more videos like this for you guys. Stay safe and be creative. Add some creativity to the world. Add some creativity by you. They could really use it. Take care. We'll catch you guys in the next video.